Hello and welcome to day 14. Today we're going to talk about your sidebar. Now, what most people do with their sidebar is they basically litter it up. And if there's a widget, they're probably using it. And that is a big mistake. Most people have their sidebar way too busy. Me too, sometimes. I've done it before. So it's not like this is something that that I'm like always perfect about. However, it's something that you need to be aware of. So let's talk about your sidebar and the kinds of things that you want to put in it. I'll see you on my screen. So basically you have a couple of different kinds of sidebars here, we'll say. You've got the sidebar that converts. Now, in this one, what I mean by convert is that it actually gets people to click on it. That's really the point of the sidebar. You want people to click on the things that are in it and actually utilize it to navigate around your site. Now, the other type of sidebar, and this is the kind that a lot of bloggers have, is the one that's just kind of there. It's there pretty much on every page of the site, and the blogger's basically treating it kind of like a retail space in that they just have so much stuff on there and they're hoping for the impulse click. It doesn't really work. So we don't want the kind of sidebar that's just there. You want it to be strategic. So let's talk about some of the good stuff that goes in your sidebar. For one, you definitely want to have a list opt-in. You want to get them on your email list. You want to get them on your email list. I want to make sure that that is very, very clear. Email list, very, very important, typically at the very top of your sidebar. Another one is links to resource guides. Now, we'll be talking about this a little bit more in a future video here, but these resource guides are quite helpful as a way to get people deep into the archives of your blog, as well as to provide great landing pages for specific topics related to your niche. We'll talk about that more, but this is something that you're going to want to have in your sidebar because they're useful. Popular posts are great to have in your sidebar because they're going to inspire people to go click on those things because they're popular. I mean, it's the whole social proof thing. Now, lastly is potentially some social media stuff, but you got to be really careful with this because a lot of people tend to overdo it. They'll tend to put like pretty much every social network that they're involved in their sidebar, and they're just basically fishing for followers. And what you don't want to do that. If you're going to have social media in your sidebar, you want to be strategic about it. Think of it like a call to action, and just like the rule of multiples that we've talked about, you don't want to have more than one. So what I would recommend, and I think this is what I do, I'd have to go back and verify, is that I have Facebook there. And that's it. Facebook with the little graphics that show people's faces who liked my page on Facebook. This provides an element of social proof. Obviously, it gets them to connect on Facebook, which I think is a lot more useful than getting them to connect with me on Twitter or even Google+. Now, this bad sidebar stuff. A lot of people tend to overload their sidebar with advertising. Now, having ads in a sidebar, there's nothing wrong with that. If ads are part of the way that you make money, that's fine. However, it's just like the rule of multiples again. If you have too many ads in your sidebar, chances are nobody's ever going to click on them, so they just don't perform very well, so why bother? A lot of times you can make more money with less advertising, so keep that in mind. Another thing that a lot of people put in their sidebar, and it's usually just a complete waste of space, and that is monthly archives, tag clouds, and blog rules. Again, most of the time they're a waste of space and nobody ever clicks on these things. So why have them there cluttering up the sidebar? Just because there's a widget in WordPress for it doesn't mean you have to use it. Keep that in mind. Going back to social media, a lot of people tend to overload their sidebar with social media links. They'll put the little badge for Google+, for Facebook, and for Twitter, and all this stuff in there, and they're basically fishing for followers. Don't do that. Maybe put one in there in your sidebar, and then somewhere else, maybe in the header or wherever else makes sense, have just little icons for your various social media graphics, and that's it. You do not want people just trying to go to social media and follow you all the time. You really want them to engage with your blog. Some people are still doing award graphics and things like that. Don't do that. If you win some award or you were featured on something, unless it's like a really notable brand and we're talking like the Wall Street Journal or some magazine, don't put it on your sidebar because it's just clutter. And lastly, your search form. Believe it or not, there are cases where having a search form on your site is a bad idea. Typically, this is going to be when you really don't have that much content on your blog yet. What you don't want is for somebody to search for something that they're interested in and then you don't have it. You basically are sending them into a dead end at that point, and they're probably just going to bounce off and go somewhere else. So if you don't have that much stuff on your blog yet, if you really don't have complete archives, then remove the search form from your blog. Now, when do you want to have no sidebar at all? Well, very important. Keep in mind that a sidebar, even if it's set up really well, it's always a distraction from whatever's going on that page. Always. What you want to do is just make it so that it's strategic. But there are cases where you don't want a sidebar because of that distraction factor. Whenever you want to have maximum attention, you want to remove the sidebar. So things like landing pages or single purpose pages. With me, even on my about page, I do not have a sidebar. When I have a page on my blog which talks about a product or something like that where I really want them to focus on that, I will remove the sidebar. That's a very, very important point, is that you don't necessarily want to have the sidebar on every single page of your blog just because that's the way your theme originally comes. You want to hack it up a little bit and remove the sidebar from different places when it makes sense to do so. So that's the sidebar. Now here's what I want you to do next. I want you to look at your sidebar and I want you to actually evaluate the reason why everything in that sidebar is there. If there's not a good reason for it being there, remove it. If it's there only because you think it's important, remove it. If it's not getting any clicks, remove it. How can you test if it's getting clicks? Well, look at things like Google Analytics, outgoing links, things like that. Another thing that you might want to consider doing is getting some type of a click tracker plugin that will allow you to actually track the clicks that are happening there, and you can then see if people are clicking on those things. Another thing that you can do is run something like crazyegg.com on your blog and find out if anybody's clicking on those things. But you want to make sure that you have things on the blog that have a strategic reason for being there and take into account what you're trying to get people to do, which is probably going to be get involved in your content in order to build a relationship and get them onto your email list. Everything else is pretty much a secondary priority, including getting involved with your social media accounts. That is something that if there's anything on the list, on my good list that you might want to consider dropping, it would probably be the social media stuff because it's not as important as you think it is. Okay, I will see you tomorrow.